Welcome back, guys. EclipseNine here with part 3 of my Symbol Art Theater tutorial series. Before we get started, let me take a moment to thank all of you for your overwhelmingly positive support. Your support is a huge part of why I've been enjoying making these videos so much, so thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Alright, let's get into it. In the previous tutorial, we looked at the kind of thinking and planning that will help your art come together a little bit easier, and we blocked out a rough version of our character, the charmingly chunky Chungus. As he is now, we could probably slap a funny phrase on the side and start sharing Chungus all over the Oracle fleet, and most people will still recognize him. If that's what we really want to do, there are a couple small additions we should make. If you watched part 2, you may remember I talked about adding in circles for the eyes. I recorded that voiceover before I did the art, and I totally forgot about the eyes. Oops. Oh well, we can make it right here and now. Since we're still working with a reference image, let's get that on screen. Take a look at the eyes and their shape. Because we're working in layers, we can ignore the pupils for now, or the black part at the center of the eye, because it won't affect the overall shape of the eye, it just sits on top of it. We can also ignore the eyelids for now, since just like the pupils, they'll sit over the top of the eyes, obscuring part of our white circles. We'll start with the left eye here. Put a circle down and change it to white. Shrink it down a bit, and I'm going to rotate it just a little bit to the left to match the slant of the eyes in our reference image. As we're positioning the eye, I want you to take note of the way the eyes interact with the cheeks. The very bottom of the left eye is covered by the cheek, but the right eye is not. This is because Chungus is standing at that slight angle we talked about on the nose. His left cheek sticks out towards the camera, obscuring the bottom of his eye, but the right cheek wraps around his face to the point that the far right edge ends behind the eye. Try to remember the structure of the layers, and group nearby parts closer together in your layer order. This will save a lot of time if you can just place a new piece right where it belongs, instead of needing to sort it through the stack. While I'm at it, I'm also going to add the nose, a simple half circle with a curved gray piece coming off the top to form the bridge of the nose. This isn't critical, but it will add some depth. When a head is being turned slightly, a piece that would otherwise be centered and pointing directly towards the camera can be turned just a little bit to the side, making it feel more like a face with some depth and character to it. In the middle of the face, details like the eye will maintain their roundness, but as they approach the edge, they will warp, because it's not a circle moving to the side of a flat surface, it's a circle moving around a three-dimensional sphere. The eye is turning away from the camera, meaning we're viewing the eye from slightly to the side instead of straight on. As we get closer to the edge, a circle gets squished and its lines begin to merge with the lines that make up the outside contours. We'll go into more about the lines soon, but for now we'll lay down some more color. First up is the teeth. I'm going to use a square with rounded corners and skew it slightly so it looks a little bit more bucktooth and fits the shape of the face on that slight turn. I'll also use one of the bean shapes colored gray to create the lip that covers the top of the teeth. While we're filling in color, let's copy the hands and shrink them down. These bean shapes are really useful for organic shapes like facial features or fingers, and you can see here they make really great thumbs. Now our hands look like they're actually gripping that big chunky belly instead of just hanging off to the side. Something seems a little bit off about the eyes, but we've still got a lot to add. There's a good chance that by the time we've filled in the area with lines and put the pupils in place, that things will look a lot better. We'll see what happens when we come back to it. So for now, we'll cover up that gap we left in the ears with some pink. I think we've done about all we can with our most simple shapes. So from here, we'll start using smaller pieces in conjunction with one another to form larger, more complicated shapes and edges. These little pointy pieces are every bit as useful as the bean piece. We'll use 3 of them right here on the left cheek to give it a scruffy look, scaling and skewing to get the size and shape right. As we work our way down the cheek, each piece will rotate to point downwards just a little bit more than the one above it. In most cases, we'll be using this technique for things like hair, so think of it as each hair providing just a little bit of support for the hair above it, meaning the hairs up top are lighter and pointing higher into the air, and the hairs at the bottom are heavier, bearing the weight of everything above it. Next up is the mouth. Make sure to position it on a layer underneath our teeth and cheeks, but above the circles we used for the neck and belly. Now we'll use a smaller circle at the bottom of the mouth to form the tongue. This is where good planning really comes into play. Ready for this? Look at this. Ready? Look at that. The left edge of the mouth butts right up against the gray curve I used in the last video to create a continuous color between the chest and the cheeks. How perfect is that? This wasn't even intentional, it just kinda lined up that way because I took the time to break the image down into its simplest shapes way back in the last video. We've saved a lot of time by not needing to perfect this left-hand edge of the mouth, and we get the chuckles of looping this footage a couple of times. I'm also going to put an extra shape up top that will form the tuft of hair between the ears. I'd like to use one of the pre-made zigzag pieces, but when I tried to use one for the edge of the cheek earlier, it didn't look like the lines were thick enough to cover what I needed it to. Rather than trying to create a filled area with this relatively complicated piece, I'm instead going to create a simple shape with a more complicated line over the top. Try to keep in mind, a simple shape with a complicated outline looks like a complicated shape. I'll come back to that in more detail when we start adding the lines in a minute. For now, let's finish the eyes by positioning some eyelids. This is the kind of situation where we're going to use the miscellaneous change part feature a lot. I'll place a part, rotate, scale, and skew it, and it might just not fit. In this case, my first instinct about which piece would fit was not correct, but it's easy enough to change, so no big deal. As I mentioned at the start of the video, what we had when we started was already good enough to stand on its own in a chat bubble, but after the additions we've made so far, it looks a lot better. We've added some life to the character, given him some expression, and even a grip on his own belly, and we've managed to do it with less than 40 pieces. That leaves us a lot of space for details. So, here we go. It's time to do the lines in the next video. Join me next time for part 4, where I try to drag a single drawing out over the course of 3 videos, all in the name of likes and subscribers. Will it work? You be the judge. No, I'm kidding. We're gonna do the line work right here and now. Let's get started. In the simplest terms, all we're doing here is tracing the outlines of what we already have. I'll start with the outside edge for now. The lines in the editor are great. The inconsistent stroke on them really give artwork a lot more character once it's outlined. If you look at my other videos, the line phase is where the art comes to life. In my Bia video, a mass of bright blue shapes and a handful of brown circles are transformed into a shirt being wrinkled and stretched by the momentum of the arms, all because of the line work. Whenever possible, we want to be using curves. The editor gives us several curve options, and for the most part we can use the skew function to fill in the differences between them. Sometimes you'll find you just can't get the right fit, at which point you've got to take a step back and reassess. Maybe you just need to change what pieces you use, or maybe you need to put a fresh piece down and start scaling and skewing all over again from scratch. Or maybe you need to reassess and rebuild the entire structure of that area, changing the shapes you use and the way you use them. Now we've made it to the top of the head where I put down that triangle earlier. I'm going to take one of the jagged lines that looks like the edge of hair and start playing around with the positioning and scaling. Once we find the right position, it'll look like the whole top of the head has multiple tufts of hair instead of just a gray triangle behind it. One extra line to fill in the opening, making it look like the lines overlap. Overlapping lines is how we'll add depth to our flat gray circles. Lines that cross each other, resulting in the end of one of them, is how the ears here look like they're protruding from the side of the head instead of straight out of the top like a horn. You can also think of it as using lines that break away from the edges we already have and extend into the middle of the shape. I'll do this on his neck, the cheeks, and the hands. We'll use curves to trace the hand, and copy-pasting with minor tweaks between them as we go is the fastest and easiest way to do this. A couple small straight lines will add enough detail to make the hands look like fingers, and thankfully we'll only have to do the tip of one finger on each hand, since we frame the image in a way that leaves most of the fingers cut off the screen. The hand on the left just isn't looking right, like the hand is way too big for the arm that's supposed to be holding it. Like it's big and swollen from a bee sting or something. What I'll do to fix this is just bump it to the right a little bit. Each piece gets 4 bumps to the right on the D-pad, and now things line up a lot better. Next, we'll work our way to the inside details, starting with the simpler lines that won't conform to any of our pre-existing shapes. I'll use one of the thicker lines with a very slight curve to turn the gray blob on the left into an arm. A piece with a bit more curve can be used for the middle of the big chunky chin. copy and pasted for the bottom lip after scaling it down a little bit. Now we'll trace our way around the mouth, using the overlapping lines technique we discussed a little bit earlier. Up top, we'll make big chunky cheeks and lips to overlap the mouth. So we've been doing the lines for a little bit now, and those empty eyes have been staring at us the whole time. They didn't quite look right from the start, but I was hoping the line work would fix it. But even after putting the lines in, the eyes still just don't feel right. It must be because he looks like some kind of milk-eyed zombie, right? Maybe putting in pupils will help. So here's the thing. Sometimes I mess up and make progress on something without recording it, and I spent about 20 minutes trying to get the pupils to line up right, tweaking the position of the white parts and messing with the lines and eyelids. And I did it all without getting the footage. Are you ready for this? This is what Chungus looked like when I realized I hadn't been recording. Ready? Here we go. Oh boy. Oh, that's bad. The reason something looked off about the eyes is because of the weird way the editor seems to render shapes at certain sizes and angles. I mentioned this in my last video, but didn't really have a good example to show along with it. Well, here's our example. The width of the eyes is inconsistent, making it impossible to place the pupils in a way that looks centered. No matter how I position the pupils, it looked like one of the edges was being pinched in. The problem was even worse at small scale, so the rotation isn't the only problem, it's size. I was too focused on keeping the eyes proportional to the reference image, staying too true to the original without considering the look of the symbol art. The best solution here is to make the eyes bigger so they read a little bit better. We'll still be able to angle them, but whatever goofiness the editor gives us won't seem as bad. So I'm going to hide all the layers that were part of the old eyes and start over from scratch. Sometimes a piece becomes stretched and skewed and rotated so many times it can be a real pain to try and get it back to its original shape. Sometimes it's better to just start with a fresh piece. The last thing I'll do with the lines is add whiskers. These will be some of only a handful of straight lines in the whole piece. Almost everything we used had at least a slight curve to it. The last thing I'm going to do is set up some lettering. I like to use a nice blocky letter, like an M, so I can space things out and get a good idea of how much space I have to work with. I'll do edit, duplicate, and move the new one to the side. In this case, I went with 16 clicks on the D-pad per letter. If you're working your way to the right, be sure to select the bottom of your two identical layers before you move it. This will keep your letters in order and make it easier to change them to something else later, using the miscellaneous change part function. While we're on the subject of changing the words to something else, I could use your help with this one. See, I still haven't come up with anything funny or useful to put in the space to the right. Thankfully, YouTube already has a built-in solution, the comments section. That's right, leave a comment and I'll change the words on Big Chungus here to reflect the best idea that comes up in the comments. How will I judge which idea is the best? Does YouTube have a like system for comments? It does? Great! Well then, that'll make things a lot easier. So the most upvoted comment will wind up on this meme. I'll start sharing the completed meme with the words of the most upvoted comment around Ship 2 on Friday. If you're not on Ship 2 but you still want to participate, no problem. If you check out part 1 of my tutorial series, you'll see that moving symbol art between ships is actually pretty easy, and it'll allow Chungus here with the winning phrase to spread throughout the fleet. So leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Don't forget to give those likes to any comment you think deserves to be immortalized beside Big Chungus. That's it for now, guys. I've covered a lot in this tutorial series so far, and I've gotten through everything I had planned. For now. Depending on feedback and questions I get on my upcoming symbol art time-lapse videos, which I have no intention of stopping anytime soon, I might put together a part 4, but I have no plans for one in the immediate future. I've got a lot of ideas and plans for future content in my channel, including content for some other games. For example, I've always wanted to put together a video tour of my Fallout settlements. For now, I'll continue making symbol art videos on a regular basis, and I'm available for commissions. My next video should be ready on Friday. It should turn out as a really cool piece with lots of detail and energy. So while I'm working on that, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you learned something over the course of these tutorials. I know that I've definitely improved as an artist as a result of making these videos, and I hope you did as well. Just slowing down and explaining why I make the choices I do has done a lot to clarify my process, and I hope you've benefited from that. If you still have questions, please let me know and I'll do my best to help. We've covered a lot in these 3 videos, but the total runtime is still just over a half hour. There's always more to learn, and you can always improve. There's always more content coming down the pipeline, so don't forget to subscribe. Next video should be hitting the YouTube sometime Friday night. Thanks again, and happy hunting!